I found a new place. Yes. And I have also... No? Come on. Come on. Ambient music? I try. I don't know if it works or not. So, anyway, welcome back, fellow listener. We are here for another 3-4 chapters of Saga of Old City. The first book ever written by Gygax. The first book of the Grey Oak Adventures and the first book of Gord the Rogue series. If you didn't know Grey Oak, it is the first setting ever created for the most notorious role-playing system, Dungeons and Dragons. So, after saying that, we continue with the book. A little note before we start. Maybe I have to make a little pause because I have to help my dad with the wash machine because it broke and I have to repair it. And I don't want he do all the work, so... Now, last time we read the chapter 13. And our hero, Gord the Rogue, escape from the Pale after some thievery and after a hot night with the daughter of the archcleric of the Pale. And in the escape, he was found by a group of bandits. And chapter 13 and there. So we restart from there. Well, let's start. I make myself comfortable and I begin. Sorry? Nothing of interest. Okay, chapter 14. Gord stood weaponless before the bandit chieftain, guarded by the pair of sentries who had spotted him. Capturing him had been easy, and the two were smirking. Easy pickings were appreciated by their ilk, and Gord had furnished them with a surprising amount of loot. Evidently, he had been spotted when he first approached the encampment, and while two of the sentries crept up on him, another pair backtracked and found Gord's horse. The gold reliquary, a heap of coins, and his weapons were displayed on a cloak, his two spread at the bandit leader's feet. "Why were you spying on us?" the big outlaw demanded. "To survive, one must be alert," said Gord evenly. "I was not spying, save to alert myself of any possible threat to my survival." "Well, chum, one didn't make much of a job of it, did one?" The bandit was mocking him, and Gord silently vowed that he would turn the tables at the first opportunity. Then the man must have noted the defiance in his captive's eyes, for after a second he added, "A tough little one, ain't you?" With that, he stirred the pile of coins before him with the toe of his dirty boot, grinning down on Gord all the while, hand on his sword hilt. Gord stared back, but kept his gaze expressionless and neutral. What? Why the music stop? Man, didn't stop. Why? Okay. "Good," the leader boomed. "I like guys with spunk. Tell you what I'm gonna do. I lost some good men this raid. So the company is short-handed. If you can handle yourself, instead of killing you, I enlist you. The fellow paused and stared hard at Gord. Gord looked back but said nothing. Okay, smartass, first you wrestle with Bogodor, said the chieftain, pointing at a hulking brute Gord could see out of the corner of his eye. And if you survive that, you can have that Finn over there with water staves. There were catcalls and sniggers from the assembled bandits at that. The chieftain looked a bit too, but then shouted for silence and continued. You don't really have to beat them, just survive. I'm giving you a break, but only because I'm short-handed. We are a fair bunch here, so if you make the grade, I'll even give you one share of the loot here, and you can keep your sword and knife. The bandit's tone was magnanimous, but if he expected Gord to thank him, the chieftain was wrong. Hi! Curious figure. Yeah. Well, anyway. How about the dagger? Gord inquired mildly. I'm best with that weapon. Sorry, chum, the bill leader said as he picked up the blade. I've taken a shine to it, but if you're real good in the tests, I'll give you my old one sometime. Gord shrugged. No sense in arguing, is there? Where do I fight this Bogodop? That's Bogodor! Sorry, wrong voice. That's Bogodor! Snarled a muscular half-orc as he moved fully into Gord's line of sight. Come here, runt, and I'll show you who is a dope. Sorry? With that, the bandits made a ring near the bonfire, and Gord was shoved unceremoniously into the circle even as he was stripping off his jerkin. Bogodor was satisfied to have it immediately, but Gord skipped away from his first clumsy rush, managing to get his shirt off meanwhile. Now his lean, muscular torso was bare. His opponent will find no easy hold on loose garments. Bogodor made another grab for him, this one less clumsy and more calculated. Again Gord eluded the attack and circled. The ugly half-orc was not as stupid as he seems. This Gord determined from the next couple of minutes of combat. Bogodor was testing Gord's skills, and each time he attempted a move, he measured Gord's responses. Gord was measuring his opponent in return. Although rather slow and a bit uncoordinated, the half-orc was strong and his hands were huge. If Bogodor ever got him in a firm hold, Gord knew that the fellow could break bones and would probably enjoy the process too. That mentality could actually work to Gord's advantage if he played things properly. It will not be the first time Gord had turned an opponent's aggression into victory. He thought to recall him for an instant his duel with Zoltan. This match, however, was trickier than it first appeared. If Gord was crippled, then he'd be useless and slain out of hand. If he seriously injured Bogodor, Gord knew that at best he'd have the undying enmity of the half-orc and whatever friends the fellow had, and the score would be evened with a knife across his throat one night. Killing him will make Gord's position that much worse. His only option, Gord realized, was to somehow win without beating Bogodor badly, and without himself being injured and unable to face the test of staves. One thing at a time, he cautioned himself as the half-orc bandit managed to grab Gord by his left arm. Gord flipped out of the grip before Bogodor could lock it into a hold, and he delivered a painful kick to the bandit's stomach in the process. Gord was still in the fight, but now the half-orc had a far better idea of what his small opponent could do. Bogodor advanced cautiously now. The encircling outlaws gave shouts of encouragement mixed with demands for Gord's dismemberment. The half-orc feinted at a leg grab, with his left hand, and then swung his hammerlike right in a looping uppercut, which, although it just grazed Gord's chin, was sufficient to send him sprawling. The off-balance Bogodor flopped down upon Gord with sufficient force to knock the wind out of him. But fortunately, it took the brute a couple of seconds to get into a position where he could utilize his advantage. In that time, Gord managed to recover his breath and clear his head sufficiently to counter, as Bogodor grabbed Gord's hair with his left hand and brought his right forearm down, aiming for his pinned opponent's throat. Things shift. By hunching, Gord managed to both protect his neck and get into a position where his jaws could lock on the beefy arm, trying to crush his windpipe. As he beat the brawny arm with all his strength, Gord slammed his open right palm into the underside of Bogodor's jaw. The blow jacked the half-orc's head back with a snap, although the bandit's thick neck muscles prevented any serious harm. This combination of bite and blow caused the bandit to blink, then howl in pain and rage. Even as he bellowed, another attack was already causing him further difficulty. Gord had cocked the fingers tangled in his hair, wrapped his hand around one of the digits, and bent it back toward the breaking point. At the same time, Gord used his left hand to grasp the huge right fist of the arm he was biting, trying to pull it to Gord's left and away from the area of his throat to relieve some of the pressure on his chest. These actions were more than sufficient to make Bogodor move. His effort to stop the jaws from clamping on his arm while maintaining his attempt to choke Gord, prevent the breaking of his finger, and still remain atop his adversary at the same time turned out to be disastrous for him. The leverage on the half-orc's right arm forced Bogodor to roll sideways when he attempted to pull his left hand away from Gord's hold on it before the finger snapped. Gord helped the situation further by bringing his right knee up sharply as Bogodor's weight was removed from that leg. The blow didn't impact with real force on the half-orc's groin, but the grunt he made when it told Gord that it hurt plenty. As the bandit's weight moved off him entirely, Gord used his acrobatic skills to arch his back and spring erect. As the bewildered Bogodor struggled to his feet, Gord spat blood at him and mocked him through reddened lips. "What's the matter, Bogodope? You only able to wrestle old men and cripples? Or maybe you like tussling with little boys?" His eyes red. Bogodor let out a howl of rage. He lost all plan of attack, wanting only to grab Gord and crush him to a bloody pulp. There wasn't much room to maneuver within the circle of bandits, but Gord could leap. He somersaulted directly into the half-orc's rush, and his feet came up just as Bogodor's big belly arrived at the same place. The force of Bogodor's charge easily reversed the momentum of Gord's roll, and with his back firmly resting on the ground, his stiff legs acted as a lever to lift the charging bandit off his feet, even as inertia continued to carry him forward. Gord used his own strength to assist the bandit on his way, and Bogodor, wind driven from his body by the belly kick, arched over Gord's head and came down with a jarring thud nearly 6 feet from where Gord now stood. The half-orc didn't move. The onlookers were stunned. Bogodor was the strongest of their number, and he'd been beaten by a young fellow half his size. There were a couple of grudging words of congratulation from the group, and someone slapped Gord on the back. Bogodor was now coming around, and already a few jibes were being aimed his way. Gord stood silently poised. He looked at the bandit with no expression as Bogodor slowly got to his feet. The half-orc stared at him a moment, shook his head, and then shot Gord a half grin. "For a little smart-ass punk, you fight good," the brute said. "We go at it again someday soon." Before anything else could be said, The chieftain stepped in and grabbed Gord by the shoulders. "Not bad, chum, not bad," he said with a tinge of admiration in his voice. "But you are not through yet. Finn here wants to show you a thing or two about handling a stick." Finn was a rangy fellow, half a head taller than Gord, and he wore the quilted padding used both to prevent chainmail from chafing and to help protect its wearer. Such gear will be a tremendous boon in a match with waterstuffs, and Finn's expression showed he was well aware of his advantage. Gord knew he was in real trouble now. He watched Finn spin and shadow fight with his iron-shod staff. It was soon going to be apparent to everyone that Gord was completely inexperienced with such a weapon. Finn certainly needed no protection from any attack Gord could mount with a quarterstaff. All the young man knew about billets like this was using them to assist in balance or for vaulting. The contest would be over quickly, and Gord could only hope that he wasn't crippled or killed in the sure-to-be painful process. A new arena circle formed, and the bandits began cheering and calling out once again. Gord was handed a heavy staff and again shoved forward. The ring closed behind him, and Finn stood facing him, on guard with his quarterstaff. Both men stood motionless for a couple of seconds, staring into each other's eyes. Suddenly, several shrieks rang out from the circle of outlaws. Gord saw with shock that a crossbow bolt had suddenly sprouted from the chest of a man across from him. Another missile had left a scarlet trail across Finn's cheek. Gord immediately threw himself to the ground, instinctively wondering why he hadn't heard the angry buzz of the bolt that hit Finn, for its flight certainly must have come close to his head. Already 2 or 3 of the bandits were down, flopping or dead, and the others were wounded. Nevertheless, they were tough fellows, and their response was immediate. It took only seconds for them to recover from the surprise of the unexpected hail of quarrels. Then they were running, dodging, crouching, scattering, at the same time that Gord was moving into a crouch and preparing to defend himself somehow with the staff. Weapons were unsheathed or grappled, and the encampment was nearly ready for a counterattack against the missiles, when 6 male horsemen thundered into the clearing. So the cannon's hounds were still after him. Bolts still flew through the air, even as their riders cantered toward the bandits with leveled lances. More bandits were slain or wounded by these missiles before the sharp lance heads beat home. As a lancer thundered past where Gord was crouched, he stabbed the thick quarterstaff between the horse's legs. The animal, naked in pain, stumbled forward, tail overhead. The rider was thrown down, rolled upon by the horse, then thrust through with a spear from his intended target. A bolt took the bandit in the leg, and he, in turn, fell to the dirt. Gord rolled for cover in the shadows, searching frantically for some weapon with which to defend himself. Already about half of the bandits were dead or seriously wounded, and only 2 of the lancers were down, at least 1 down for certain. The 4 still atop their steeds had discarded their long weapons in favor of sword and axe. Several more of the outlaw band fell, but one of the horsemen was struck full in the chest by a flail. The soldier had hardly hit the ground before 2 bandits fell upon him and finished the work. "Here, chum!" The words reached Gord just as a blade, his own dagger, buried itself in the tree trunk beside his head. The thrower was the chief of the company of bandits. Gord was grateful for the gesture, and also pleased that the fellow didn't seem to notice how far the dagger had sunk into the tall bronzewood ball. As Gord tugged the weapon free with difficulty, the leader called out to him again. "If ain't much, but you better be good with it, 'cause we are up to our heads in alligators." With that, the chieftain darted beyond the clearing, probably aiming to stop the sniping crossbowmen from doing further bloody target practice. Gord moved to position himself where he could make effective use of the dagger. No sense in pitting himself face to face with the soldier's longer arms. From behind or in a grappling melee, the blade would be deadly, but against long sword or red axe, the disadvantage would be telling. Only one of the men-at-arms was still horsed. Another fought beside his slain steed, broad-blooded sword swinging in vicious arcs. At least two of the crossbowmen had dropped their missile weapons to join their embattled fellows in the glen. Bogodor, armed with a huge morning star, stepped before their advance, and with a mighty swing wounded one, despite his mail, before either could react. Then both soldiers countered with swords, and the half-orc was hotly defending himself from their cuts and thrusts as Gord crept closer to the action. Bogodor might have been strong, but he wasn't skilled at arms. In a minute he was bleeding, and in another he was down. The soldiers were good, but that didn't prevent Gord from striking as soon as he got his blade within range of one soldier's back. The supernaturally keen point of his dagger passed through the steel mesh of the foeman's mail coat, as if it were mere leather, and the second blow finished the job. The dead man's comrade had been heading off to assist the unhorsed soldier, who was now hard-pressed defending himself against several of the bandits. The sounds of his partner's demise made him turn back quickly. However, when he saw Gord taking the dead soldier's sword, he raised his own brand and rushed to revenge his fallen mate. Gord barely had time to raise the newly gained sword and ward off the man's opening stroke. Gord found himself in a lengthy fencing match that tested his skills and abilities to their fullest. The soldier was better than he at swordplay, but Gord had the advantage of his dagger to ward and threaten. Both opponents were bleeding from small cuts, Gord more so than the armored foeman, but Gord was fast and agile, and far fresher than the mail-burdened swordsman opposing him. The soldier aimed a flurry of blows at Gord, and when this onslaught forced Gord to retreat, the fellow finally took the opportunity to unsheath his own poniard. Now the soldier thought the match to be balanced or unbalanced rather in his favor, and he moved in for the kill. Gord hurled his dagger with full force into his opponent's thigh. The soldier, in severe pain, made an off-balance lunge that Gord easily dodged, then prepared to attack again. But the fellow couldn't keep from glancing down for a fraction of a second at the hilt of the weapon protruding from his thigh. That blink of time was all Gord needed. He struck a desperate blow with his sword, using both hands to maximize its effect. Blade edge snapped steel links and bone as it clove the shoulder, sending the soldier to the ground, never to rise again. Another one down. To Gord. Oh, sorry. Telephone. Call. One moment. Pronto? Ciao. Sorry for the wait. I have a job call, so I have some work to do, and an incident. So I didn't predict the future. Today I think we can go. We can't read a lot. So I continue. Where are we? Okay, so he struck a desperate blow with his sword, using both hands to maximize its effect. Blade Edge snapped the steel links and bone as it clove the shoulder, sending the soldier to the ground, never to rise again. Another one down took Gord as he crushed and rapidly survived the area near before other antagonists. There was no one to be seen, only steel forms. From the trees around the hollow he heard the sounds of battle, a shout, a cry, and then all is silence broken by weak groans from the bodies scattered nearby. Gord stepped into the darkness and waited. A few minutes passed, and then he heard the sound of cautious footsteps approaching the encampment in the hollow. The twin fires burned but feebly now, and it was difficult to distinguish anything beyond a few pieces from them. A dark shape entered the clearing, moving from body to body. Gord wished he had his dagger, but he hefted the big sword, preparing to face another opponent. The unidentified man came closer. Then a tongue of flame from a burning log shot up for a moment and brought more brightness to the place. The grim face of Finn was revealed in the brief glow. "Hey, Finn!" called Gord softly, using the fellow's name to give immediate assurance of friendliness. "I'm here! Who else lives?" With that, Gord moved slowly from his place of concealment and allowed Finn a moment to identify him before he went to the body of the dead soldier and recovered his precious dagger. Finn watched him with a stony expression. "So our captain is now one of the surviving company of free-takers," he said with sarcasm in his voice. "Well, shit. You must be pretty good or you wouldn't have made it, I suppose." Most of these others sure didn't. He left it at that and returned to his inspection. Gord noted with a shudder that he was slit in throats. As it turned out, Finn determined that only 3 of his comrades had less than mortal wounds. They would recover and be well enough to move on in a couple of days. Finn and Gord had checked every fallen person, soldier and bandit alike. Hopeless wounded comrades and foemen were emotionlessly done in by the tall brigand. The dead were stripped of any valuables, and the horses of the men-at-arms were tethered with the draft animals of the bandits. Gord's heart lifted at the sight of his own stallion securely tied with the latter. Seeing as how there's none to object just now, Finn said flatly, "you and I get to divvy up the spoils. I'll take 5 shares for my work. You get 2, and we'll assign one each for Jan, Crowbit, and Colonus." "Hell with you," Gordon replied just as flatly. "Just because your captain died doesn't make you chief." Gordon met a menacing stare from Finn with one of his own. Finn broke the contest by slowly eyeballing the 3 of wounded who were in no condition to join the debate. "You take the shares, then," he said, nodding toward them, "and we are even." "Wrong again," snapped Gord, beginning to feel anger. "I take what's mine, including what I already got from 2 of those palish soldiers, and you split up what's left however you decide." Grim-faced Finn made a motion toward the short sword at his hip. Gord's own was drawn quicker, but it did not attack. Finn let the blade slide back into its scabbard. "Let's talk this over in friendly fashion, eh?" "Gord is my name," the young adventurer said, naked steel in hand. It took a long time, but eventually they agreed on a split. There was quite a bit of loot, far more than Gord had imagined. The dead leader of the company, one Trigon, had led the bandits in a successful raid into the Pale. The bales of goods were not common goods. It seemed but rare commodities, fur pelts and ivory from the lands to the north, brocaded cloth and tapestries from Tenite artisans, and the costly devotional incense of the Pale, intended for the markets of Realmord in Nyrond. What the former owners of these goods might have personally carried, Gord did not learn, but dozen men-at-arms had netted the survivors of their attack 10 good mounts, a pile of weapons and armor, saddles and tack, and about 2 orbs value in various coins. Finn wanted the gold reliquary more than any of the other treasure. Gord agreed he could have it for a quit claim on everything else, provided that he could get the agreement of John, Crowbait and Calonas, that 7 shares went to Gord and 1 to each of them. "They'll agree," said Finn with a sly smile, "because they know that they are not in good enough shape to argue with me." Finn accompanied Gord and the wounded outlaws only as far as the edge of Netherwood. He rode toward Mid-Meadow then, while Gord and the others made for Longford. As they passed through the shallows, crossing the Ayrton Seamay into the Bandit Kingdoms, Gord wondered what fate would befall the lone man. Finn had indeed gained a far better monetary exchange, for the reliquary and its contents easily outvalued the whole of the other treasure by a factor of not less than 6 to 1. But that disparity didn't trouble Gord in the least. Somehow, he thought, those palish soldiers had managed to follow him wherever he went, despite tricks that should have at least thrown them off his trails for a bit. Somehow they had located him in the bandit camp, even though they couldn't have tracked him through that marsh at night. Luck, perhaps. The noise of the rowdy outlaws during his testing had been overloud, but nevertheless. Gord did not believe that Finn would lead a long and prosperous life from the proceeds of the sale of the temple's prize. That evening, Gord and his bandit companions arrived at their destination, the outlaw city of Stoneink, where they could dispose of the goods and horses and rest without fear of pursuit. At last, Gord was coming to a place where everyone he met was a thief of one sort or another, and he relished the prospect. Not that he expected things would be much different, but perhaps hypocrisy and pretense would be done away with. Imagine, he thought, a place where officials honestly admit their robbery. End of chapter 14. I drink a sip of water. Sorry again for the pause. I have work issues. The work is the work. I a bit decentered. Sorry for the hand. Better. Not. Next time I adjust that. So we read only 3 chapters today because it's a bit late and I have only 30 minutes and I read the chapter 15 and then chapter 16 and then we end. Next time there will be 4, I hope. I have to make the door open. Okay. Now, I have to do a little of math because we end at chapter 16 today. Next time 4 we go to 24 and then let's see. So, chapter 15. Once the Aerdians had amassed an empire that extended far beyond the modern-day boundaries of what is known as the Great Kingdom. At its height, the northern frontier reached all the way to the northern bank of the Ayrton Seamay River. Stoneink was then a military outpost. At first, a fortified encampment, the place grew rapidly to become a town, as imperial troops were brought there to prepare for further conquest. With them came a host of civilians, craftsmen, settlers, camp followers, and the lot. When the expansion of the Aerdi Empire stopped, the local became bastion against invaders. It was walled and became a garrison place. The ebb of the Overking's power came slowly, and as the edges of the empire crumbled into sovereign states, Stoing was more and more isolated from its distant rulers and took on greater individuality and independence. After some 4 centuries, its inhabitants turned to banditry, and for 200 years thereafter, right down to this day, they have continued to be robbers. The town was now Gord's home, and it felt right to him. The town proper had perhaps 12,000 people. 2 suburbs, Holdrun and Rossworth, brought the total to 14,000, when there were few bandit merchant caravans or mercenary companies in the area. Stoing was actually a city-state, for its Lord Mayor was also boss of a considerable territory, essentially what had once been a frontier march and fiefdom granted from the Over-King of Aerdi. Boss Dioli, Lord Mayor of Stoing, despotically ruled the destinies of somewhere between 50 and 70,000 folk. Destinies, provided his enforcers were on hand to back up his dictates. Otherwise, residents and visitors alike did pretty much as they pleased. That made for a wild, brawling and truly chaotic community, with competing factions constantly at each other's throat. Gord was gratified that he had come with a fat purse, for the pickings were far from ample in Stoing. Everyone was busy trying to steal from his neighbor, and of course those neighbors with anything worth taking were exceptionally vigilant with respect to guarding valuables. John, Crowbait and Calonas took their splits and drifted off to revel in whatever scenes of debauchery they favored. Gord found an inn, the Three Gables, on the west end of town, and there we settled down to reconnoiter. For the first week or so, he would occasionally encounter one or another of the 3 bandits, but evidently they ran out of funds and went elsewhere to seek more, for Gord never ran into them again. He certainly didn't miss their company, for the 9 wards of Stoing provided sufficient entertainment. After a few weeks, however, exploration and discovery began to weary him. If the town was an odd mixture of buildings, its polyglot population was even stranger. From the throngs of freebooters, bargemen, and riffraff of Rotsworth, where cargo stolen from who knew where arrived daily, to Aldron's rowdy encampment of brigand gangs and mercenary companies, there were all races of men, near men, and humanoids. Stoing offered something to sweet the taste, base or not, of resident and visitor alike. The shops carried goods from every part of the Flenes, from distant parts of the Great Kingdom, the Backlonish states of Tuesmith and Ekbeer. Every place seemed to produce some item that the robber bands eventually brought here. Interspersed with these shops, the vice dens, taverns, slave pens, and unidentified establishments where the stores where normal artisans, craftsmen, and tradesfolk made and sold their wares. The apparently large number of legitimate business surprised Gord at first, but then he realized it was logical that such a population needed the goods and services of any normal community as well as those in the endeavors directly related to banditry. Ratsworth was the rope-work tanneries and the brisk trade in small spars and timber. In Stoing proper, the tenant leader of aurochs, horses and more exotic creatures was worked into leather goods of all sorts, especially armor and shields of exceptional quality. Gord learned that large shipments of such were sent to outfit soldiers and adventurers of the lands around the Neardive and beyond. The origin of the armor was not advertised naturally. Neardive, wrong lecture. After trafficking in stolen goods, the next mainstay of the economy was slave trading. That major industry brought buyers from many distant places and was the main revenue source for the town itself. Aldrun was a thriving village dominated by taverns, brothels, gambling parlors, and similar places aimed at separating arriving bandits and freelancers from their coinage. Amid this whole talk were also weapon forges, horse traders, and all manner of provisioners and suppliers. The town gates were open from dawn to dusk. but as the sun's last rays tinged the sky with rosy hues, all large bodies of foreigners were herded outside Stoink, so there was much nighttime revelry in the two adjoining villages. Gord had sampled the offering of these villages frequently since arriving in this bandit land. Rat's Wharf and Old Rune had little more than low dives, however, and Gord found he greatly preferred the entertainments of Serpent Lane and Sugill Way to anything outside the walls. Leisure activities of this sort tended to be expensive, so after a few weeks Gord became more alert of money-making opportunities. Unlike spending opportunities, chances for gain were more scarce around here than honest men and virgins. Certainly his skill enabled him to pick up a few coppers here, a silver noble or so there, but nothing significant. Before much more time passed, Gord found himself down to the last few drops of his share of bandit loot, and facing the prospect of dipping into his own hoard of electrum gold and platinum. He decided it was time to break out of his traditional mold and do something more productive. Locating the headquarters of the local Thieves Guild was simple. It bore a large and colorful sign. The rather splendid place was on Safe Avenue, in the north ward between the Slave Market and Stonegate, the eastern entryway that also divided the Stoink's clay brick ward from the administrative Great Ward complex. Safe Street was a thoroughfare linking the fortress area of the lords of the city with the bustling slave bazaar to the north. Gord enjoyed the street names for the routes leading to the marketplace. Safe, Joy, Shackle. Cute folk, these Stoinkers. This seemed both a logical and cautious place for headquarters to be, near the most prosperous quarter with its back to the great blocks of the wall, and having a direct route to the government office to the south. So thinking, Gord turned the corner of Crook Street, another enjoyable name, and crossed the Pike Street Safe Street. In a short time, he was within the confines of the thieves' home base. "Here to recover stolen property?" a dun-clad fellow asked mildly from a trestle table that served as a desk, separating the building's vestibule from access to the interior. Gord surveyed him briefly, shaking his head. The thief guard looked surprised, for Gord appeared to be a well-to-do artisan or merchant, perhaps one who should be uncomfortable in surroundings such as this. "Then are you here to hire services?" Gord shook his head again and studied the interior of the place, moving so as to be able to peer into the corridor behind the speaker. "Okay, buddy, quit gawking and tell me what the hell you do want. Are you lost? Stupid? Or a sightseer?" At this last question, the guard got out of his chair, strode around the desk, and none too gently took Gord by the arm to usher him out. "I'm here to join the guild," Gord said blandly. The thief paused in his effort to usher the strangely hard-to-move fellow outside and looked. "Who put you up to this anyway?" he said, his tone growing less jocular. "It is a piss-poor joke, and you are lucky I'm taking it easy with you." As this last was said, the guard found that Gord had somehow turned and was moving behind him and back into the room again. Now the thief was getting peevish. "No joke, friend." Oh, sorry, wrong voice. "No joke, friend," Gord told the slowly reddening fellow as he sprang lightly atop the desk and then into the guard's chair. "I am an accomplished master, and I'm here to inscribe my name on your register." This was too much for the man, and he reached for his dagger, but his hand grasped nothing, and he stared down in amazement at the empty scabbard. When he glared up toward the interloper, he found Gord cleaning his nails with the weapon. Worse yet, a small pile of his belongings were on the table in front of this bold fellow. "That's it, asshole!" he said, leaping for Gord. The thief landed with a crash where Gord had been sitting a moment before, then slumped to the floor. As pounding footsteps approached from within the building, the poor rogue managed to regain his feet and look around in a daze. "I'm here," Gord said nearly in his ear from a cross-legged seat atop the trestle table, "and I still wish to register." "Damn it, Stoat!" What you are doing out here?" The speaker was a man of powerful build and no-nonsense expression. He stood in the hall behind the desk, glaring alternately at the guard and at Gord with one bright grey eye, and a black leather patch covering the other socket. The man had an authoritative air that Gord immediately perceived, even more impressive in his own way than Gord remembered Arventol to be. Was he a high-ranking thief, the master of this guile, or something else altogether? Gord smiled at the man who was surveying him and nodded a greeting, not committing himself with words until he saw what would happen next. "Listen, Gellor," the fellow now identified as Sot whined. "I didn't do nothing but try to keep this shit out of here, but he got rogue. Look out for him, he's fast," he warned. Taking stock at his word, Gellor moved to draw his sword and take care of things in his own way. Seeing this, Gord laughed merrily and held his smile. "Hold on," he said. "I did no harm to Stott's person, only to his pride. When I put on a performance, he came to escort me out, and as he tried, I stripped him of dog, money, and all. Look here!" Gord cried, pointing to the loot and letting out another laugh. Gellor abandoned his threatening posture, slammed his sword back in his sheath, and stared at the evidence. Then he looked hard at Stott with the hint of a smile on his face. "Come on, Gellor, the asshole threw me over the desk," Stott argued. "You jumped over it to attack me, only I wasn't there to get," Gord countered mildly. Then, for good measure, he added flippantly, "You are the asshole." At that, the grin disappeared from Gellor's face. From Gellor's face. "Never mind who is or isn't a sphincter muscle here," he said again, directing his attention to Gord. "What the hell do you want?" "I am an accomplished thief, Gord by name, here to join the guild. Stott here can testify to my abilities." "No screwing around or horseplay at the headquarters, see?" Gellor interrupted. He sized up Gord in silence for a moment. "No more of this crap with fellow thieves, either. Even if they are assholes," he continued. "Now come on back, and I'll get you enrolled. It costs a lucky if you are beyond journeyman status. Those are a noble amount whether or not you score, and we take the usual 20%. As Gord moved to follow him, Gellor turned back to Stott. "Now keep a better watch, chump, and don't be mistaking your fellows for marks anymore," he ordered as Stott sullenly set about repocketing his possessions. Gellor took Gord to a large chamber inside the headquarters. "In case you haven't already figured it out," he said, "I have a high station, shall we say, within this organization. You are fortunate that I, and not one of Stott's peers, happened along when you made your ostentatious entrance. Now, let's see how serious you really are about joining the guild." Gellor summoned a messenger and instructed him to fetch 6 other individuals for a meeting. He introduces Gord to this man, all master thieves, and informed Gord that they would pass judgment on his request for membership. Then Gellor sat back and ordered Gord to tell his story. To be on the safe side, Gord told the audience that he was from Lukish. He briefly recounted his travels in Ernst and the Theocracy, omitting most details, including the fact that he was associated with the René Wagonfolk. The less they actually knew about him, the better. After all, what was actually important was his talent as a thief. This was established readily enough by the successful performance of a few simple tests for the benefit of the master thieves, followed by Gellor's recounting to them of Stott's embarrassing experience in the entranceway. With the preliminaries out of the way, Gord paid over the initiation fee of 1 electrum coin, plus a silver one for his first month's dues. His name was written on the guild register, a writ of identification was prepared for him, and the rules of thievery in Stoing were carefully explained to him by Assistant Guildmaster Uwe Polik. No establishment protected by Boss Daily could be touched. These places were marked by the official blazon of Stoing. All other spots were fair game, although it seemed to be the thieves' opinion that there were damn few other locations worth bothering with. Marks were marks, but mayoral guards, the watch, town officials, and a raft of others were considered off limits. The enumeration went on and on until Gord's head began to swim. His initial impression of Stoink as a veritable playground for thieves was apparently somewhat inaccurate, to put it mildly. "This place is worse than Wintershaven," he exclaimed with disgust. "At least a thief there can steal from anybody. Though the risk might be death. That brings me to the part about punishments here," replied Uwe Paulik. He then proceeded to detail all of the things a thief will suffer upon being caught in the commission of a felony, or if apprehended afterward, unless the protection of the guild was obtained by reporting a successful job to officials at any of the various and constantly shifting sub-headquarters that the thieves maintained in the 9 wards of the city. An assassin could still be sent after a thief, of course, even after he or she was safe from the law, but that seldom happened, you've added, for the expense of hiring a killer was great, and the property wasn't returned even if the thief was dispatched. As Gord was preparing to make his leave, Geller came up to him and said in a friendly tone, "It is a rotten place to make a dishonest rob, but after a while the town grows on you." "So does green slime," Gord retorted. "Tell you what," the one-eyed man said in a placating way. "You and I can go over to Old Rune. I've seen only a little of your work, and I like to see more. Besides, I hear that a bunch just arrived that hit it big. We can both pick up some change." Geller told Gord that the Horn and Haunch was the best tavern in the whole urban area, not just in Old Rune, so they went there. The place had a typical afternoon crowd, although the drinkers appeared a bit better dressed than in the place Gord had been to. Most were obviously mercenaries, bandits, or worse, but they wore oiled mail or well-preserved leather. Studding on Jack and Bernie was polished. Cloth garments were neither shoddy nor in need of cleaning and mending. Most surprising of all, there was no overpowering odor of sweat and horses. The place was a marvel indeed, and the wenches were most pretty and buxom too. Gord was happy, decided to humor Geller or vice versa, no matter. "This is one of the most pleasant gathering places I ever frequented," said Geller. "Even as well-traveled as you are," he added with a smirk. "I expect you will find it the same. Now, for some refreshment." Geller recommended some of the dry white wine from Furiondi to begin with. After several goblets of the stuff, Gord felt quite able to attack the tavern's bill of fare. And soon food was set before them. Tob, the proprietor, fitted his name quite well, and this worthy, together with a woman to see to their drink and a lad to step and fetch, personally attended the pair. Geller was evidently a regular here, and well regarded by Tob. More of the crisp, apple-fragranced wine was poured for them as their host set a pewter salver before them. It was filled with morsels of radishes with black skins, smoked rounds of eel, scallions, and pickles. All of it tasted delicious, especially when washed down with the Furiondian vintage. They also had a small loaf of bread with a golden and crispy crust and soft white crumb. The wall was gone all too soon, and Gord was about to call for more when bowls of pink liquid were placed before them. This stuff was a thick, creamy soup of a sort he had never tasted. Geller told him it was made from the young giant crayfish taken from the mill pond of Aegil Creek. It was made with wine, cream, and herbs, plus only Tab knew what. Gord felt like licking the bowl clean when he'd finished the last spoonful he could get out of it. Both men sat back a bit and enjoyed their contentment. The wench, Amy, brought them fresh goblets, filled this time with an emerald-colored elvish wine. Whether from Celine or Ulek, Gord neither knew nor cared. As the wine was poured, the boy hastily removed their bowls, for Tab was at hand with a brace of swabs for each. The beers were roasted to perfection, juicy and stuffed with green grapes. When the tiny bones were picked clean and the last globe of fruit devoured, Gord thought no prince or king had ever dined so well. Geller, in contrast, seemed only mildly satisfied, telling their host that so far all had been acceptable. So far? That made Gord wonder, but not for long. The elfish wine was whisked away in favor of a deep ruby-hued wine served to them in Salis, chalices. Gord imitated Gellor's action as the one-eyed thief swirled and sniffed the stuff. The aroma was eady and tantalizing. Gord sipped and found the flavor full, strong, and impossible to describe. Just as one flavor seemed to come to mind, the vintage moved a different part of his palate to identify another taste, and when he let the last of it pass down his throat, still another sensation filled his mouth. Then a vast dish filled with mutton and legumes, seasoned with garlic and herbs, was placed before them, and both fell to. Gord more from the appetizing odor and appearance of the dish than from hunger for it. Could it be that this course was even better than the previous ones? Neither man could possibly finish this last portion served, and when the remainder was cleared, both belched and grinned. As if by magic, small plates with various sorts of greens were placed before them. Gord's nose detected vinegar, fine oil, and pepper. Gellor spared the leafy bits and ate them with relish, and Gord followed suit. The stuff was tasty, and removed the greasy mutton aftertaste from his mouth. Soon the plate was clear of all, but a few stray bits of parsley and cress. At last they were finished, thought Gord, but he was mistaken once again. The astonished Gord was served a trencher of thin white bread. A dozen cheeses were put before them, and a crock of butter placed between the pair. As more wine was poured, Gellor said, "Tub, you continue to amaze me. I must admit, where did you find these wonderful cheeses? I haven't seen their like in years." Tub only beamed and hurried off to serve his other customers. Gellor enlightened Gord as to the nature of several of the small wheels and rounds on the table. One was a goat cheese from far to the west, cat, actually. Another one with great holes and a sharp, vaguely nutty flavor was Perlander. Still another was a creamy and delicious, but very smelly one made by the Frosty, and now Frosty, and now as Jekyll for the town of its origin. Best of all, Gord liked an ivory-colored cheese with greenish marbling through its center. His companion informed him it was called Wickler from the Yeomanry. Just after this array came some diminutive tarts of various sorts, berry, nut, and mincemeat. At last it was really over, and the thoroughly stuffed patrons sipped brandy and groaned. "How could such a place exist?" Gord demanded of Gellor, "and how came you to find it? Never have I eaten such." The one-eyed man smiled sardonically and shrugged. No, tell me." "Come on, my boy," he replied. "Think you seriously that everyone here has always been a lowly thief, or always dwelt in such a pest hole as Stoink?" Ruminating on the full meaning of those remarks, Gord joined Gellor in a stroll around Old Ruin to settle their meal and work off its attendant lethargy. After all, they had come here for more than a banquet. End of chapter 15. Then we read another chapter and we end. 12 pages, so I think we end for 7:30, maybe. Pretty late, but I have work to do so. Okay. Whoa. Chapter 16. Near midnight, they entered the Double Digger. The rundown building was packed with rostering men, and no one noticed two more of the same sort when they entered. The hall was long and relatively narrow, and Gord and Gellor spent a fair amount of time slowly working their way from front to rear, pausing now and then to get fresh flagons and join briefly in a conversation or a game. If anything, the tavern became more crowded with the passage of time, but while there were many patrons, there were few worthy of attention from pickpocket or cutpurse. Risking detection for the sake of gaining sufficient money to merely supply themselves with drinks during the exercise seemed foolish and wasteful. Gord was just getting ready to suggest that they move on to some more promising place when a group of loud and logging newcomers attracted his attention. The young thief knew that their boisterousness was by design, not from excess drink, although most observers would deem it otherwise. Gord signaled to Gellor, and the pair moved closer to see what was going to happen. Signaled. Well, anyway. The newcomers were soon dispersed along the length of the place, joking, buying drinks, and talking. A bit of eavesdropping revealed that the fellows were ostensibly recruiting for their brigade of mercenaries, the sum being offered for enlistment, a lucky head, was almost too good to be true, and vague promises of little fighting and much loot were too general to be real. That the recruiting was actual, however, could not be doubted, for a score or more were convinced and left with some of the newly arrived men to enlist immediately and get the coin, which will buy them another 100 drinks, or a wench, a jug, and plenty left for another carouse. Gellor signaled to Gord to carefully watch the apparent leader, one who referred to himself as Flatchet. That one and two others who looked like lieutenants spent most of their time asking casual questions and listening attentively to the slurred replies, prompting now and then and directing. That was indeed of note. The pair moved closer, feigning being fairly under the weight of much strong ale. Soon both were part of a circle of people discussing the affairs of the free lords, as the rulers of the petty bandit states referred to themselves, and particularly the recent incursions of the Horned Society into Wormhole and Warfields, the two westernmost territories of the Bandit Kingdoms, which were both currently occupied by forces beholden to the evil hierarchs. After the assemblage gave forth a smattering of oaths of vengeance upon these dreaded masters of the Horned Society, Tark turned to criticism of the desultory nature of the warfare being waged, ostensibly for the purpose of dislodging the invaders and impaling the puppet rulers they had placed over the conquered territories. Then, with but a few words spoken with the air of one who knows, Flatchet planted in the listeners' minds the impression that it was the Tana host, not the hierarchs of the Horned Society, that had really started the trouble. One of the bandits nodded agreement, stating that had the damned Tanites not brought their bomb-blasting cavalry across the Zamker River, thus invading the sovereign bandit states of Grosskopf and Phalanx to the northeast, then no trouble with the up till then friendly Horned Society would have occurred. Tow, one of the two lieutenants, asked why in hell everyone was mad at the hierarchs anyway. After all, the Black Duke of Tan held lands rightfully belonging to the Free Lords. The Sod had started the trouble, gained from it, and was getting off rather free, while two former allies fought one another. Agreement with this line of reasoning was emphatic and loud, and soon the whole place was passing the idea around and asking just what fighting with the hierarchs did but help enemies like Ernst, the Shield Knights, and the hated Knights. This revelation seemed totally new to the bandits, and the effect it had was startling. Gord thought that before another day passed, there would be mutterings all the way to Ratsworth about taking vengeance upon the Duke instead of fighting with their virtual cousins from across the right-hand side. Then the talk came around to Gellor and Gord. "You don't seem pretty quiet," Flatchet noted. "How about allowing me the pleasure of refiling your jacks with our host's good ale, and telling us your line of work?" Gellor did not speak up right away, but Gord was less reticent. "I am Gord," he said, "the captain of a small company of free swords lately come here after visiting the Palish." He reposed for a breath and grinned ruefully. "I was hoping to recruit a few men myself," he said. "The dirty dungeaders of the Pale took a few good friends from our company. It seems that you are better equipped with speech and coin than I, so you observe me listening and learning." "What company is that?" Flatchet asked smoothly. "Ever hear of the Grey Beggars?" Gord offered. When Flatchet showed no immediate sign of recognition, he continued. "No? Maybe you know some of the locals who were with us for a time? Finn, Bogodor." The questioner thought for a moment. Finn, is he tall or a short one? Tall, and Bogodor had a lot of orcish in him. Hard to forget once you see him, Gord added with a touch of sarcasm. Yeah, those two I've heard of, but not the company, said Flatchet. No surprise, drawled Gord. We came out of the Flinties where their Gambog forests meet them. Had to move north from there too, because the Neuron days were getting pissed at our successes. And you? Flatchet asked, turning to Gord's companion. Me? I am from Stoink, and I mind my own business, Geller snapped. No need to get testy, friend, Flatchet said soothingly while signaling for more ale. I am just trying to round up a likely man for the brigade, and you look prime. Gord again took the interplay to himself. Any bonus for officering and bringing a score or two of Ardis? He asked. Veterans? Nothing but likely closer to 3 score if the boys are having any luck recruiting over east around Onglewood and Bloor. Triple shares for a captain and double for his right hand, plus a common head for every sword. You bring your grey beggars into the brigade and you'll get your coin. Gord looked pleased when Flatchet said that, and he then nodded toward Geller. My pal, here is too modest, Gord began. He is a hell of a scrapper and has other talents to boot. Besides all that, he could get you near a dozen as good, I'll bet. Right, Geller? It's hard times in Stoink right now. The one-eyed thief looked sour at the suggestion, but said no word of denial. After pausing to give Geller a chance to respond, Flatchet pumped him for more information. You as good with a sword as your friend says? Taking his cue from Geller's low nod, Flatchet continued. Can you get more like you? Shit. Half the types and rakes in the town will follow my lead. The one-eyed man said softly, but why the hell should I want to go riding off with your brigade on some half-assed nothing of a raid into the blue? I think I can trust a pair like you, the stranger said, leaning closer and speaking in a conspiratorial tone with slurred tongue. Flatchet told them, we are putting together a whole goddamned army, and we are gonna suck Red Spawn. Gord and Geller looked at each other in shock. That was a most unlikely plan, for the town was heavily fortified, well garrisoned, and prepared to withstand siege. Besides, it was in Tan, and who wanted a full-scale war with the able Tana host? They turned to stare at Flatchet, whose upper body was now beginning to weave. His expression was comic, a cross between wonderment over having divulged secret information and puzzlement, as though he was surprised over being so inebriated so quickly. The captain's eyes were beginning to cross. Gord, knowing that it wouldn't be long before he was beyond conversation, spoke quickly and loudly. Don't that, Flatchet. I'll bring you the grey beggars, and Cyclops here will also furnish as many as he can, he said, as he clapped the fellow on the back in camaraderie, he added, the 200 we can guarantee only if you sign us up now, and advance a bit of the coin. The other one of Flatchet's lieutenants was elsewhere, but Tow was nearby and listening casually. He turned his full attention to their table when he heard the thud of Flatchet's head as the captain slumped into unconsciousness. Come here and help us, Geller demanded of him. This wily bastard has talked us into furnishing a full company, and now is too loaded to sign us up and pay over the silver. As Tow came near, Gord asked, You do have the money, don't you? We take it ill indeed to be lied to. Tow gave assurance of ability to pay, and with apologies for his captain's drunkenness, said he'd personally take care of the matter, providing that the two would help him get Flatchet safely to their bivouac nearby. They assisted, of course, and in a short time had managed to get the now comatose captain a few hundred paces to the field nearby where a collection of tents and hastily constructed shacks made up the recruiters' encampment area. From what was here, Gord surmised that the strength of the group already exceeded 600. Several pennons flapped idly in the breeze. It was too dark to identify them, but their presence did indicate that the whole companies had been recruited. Perhaps they really did intend to attack Redspan. Tow stopped before a hut, indicating that this was headquarters. After some fumbling, he opened the door while Gord and Gellor held up the unconscious Flatchet. A quick scraping of flint sent a shower of sparks onto tinder, and from the tiny flame a candle was lighted. "Bring him in and you can tell me what kind of deal you've worked out," called Tow. "You bet," said Gellor. It was pitch black outside the door, but Gord sensed his companions wink as they dragged their charge into the structure. There were only 2 rooms, the bigger being first. It was cluttered with a long table, several chairs and stools, and a bench along the right wall. Tow led them through a crooked doorway and started another candle to illuminate the narrow chamber at the rear. Here they carried the seemingly dead Flatchet, only his faint breathing and the wreck of stale beer indicating he was not in fact gone from this world. Without ado, they flopped him atop the cot in the room. Gord glanced around quickly, noting a large armoire, a campaign chest, a commode, and a cloak hanging from a peg near the door. "The strain must be getting to him," remarked Tow, looking down at his captain. "What?" said Gord. Tow expanded on his remark. "Never seen Flatchet get so drunk that he's passed out on the job. But then again, I've never seen him try anything this big." "That's for sure," nodded Gellor. "Getting an army together to kick Palish ass out of Redspawn is one hell of a big undertaking, especially when nobody is allowed to know what they are being hired for." Tow appeared thunderstruck at Gellor's casual mention of the real purpose of the stranger's mission in stowing. Gord broke in and spoke reassuringly, getting the conversation back on the right track. "Let's get us signed up and that advance taken care of, okay, Tow?" he suggested. "I'll need all the time I can get to add another 70 men to my grey beggars, and Gellor here has his work cut out too. Shit, we'd like to field 300 for Flatchet, and maybe we can do that if we ever get started." But Tow was not easily distracted from his concern. "So he told you everything?" the lieutenant asked. "Of course," Gord piped up immediately. "We are in this too, as Flatchet saw when we agreed to join with everything we got. When he told us what was really going on, we upped the number. Hell man, I'm sending one of my boys to see if he can locate Steeljack's band." "Steeljack's? Come on, Tow, you must have heard of him. He runs a bunch of brigands out of Netherwood. Why, last I heard he had 300 horse with a warlock to back him up." Tow looked impressed at that. Gathering his resolve, he went to the campaign chest, unlocked it, and took out a ledger volume and a small brass box. Holding this, he beckoned the other 2 to follow him back into the main room. Gord shut the door on the sleeping Flatchet as he departed. After flipping the book open, Tow got a wheel and an inkpot from the brass box. He had each man inscribe his name and his pledge of man in turn. Then, closing the register, he said, "Come back in the morning and Flatchet will settle the payments you are to get." "Give him the book," Gellor demanded. "What for? The deal was for here and now. You are not living up to it, so I'm crossing out my name. Tell that drunken stewpot in the morning that he's out on my boys and he has you to thank." "Hey Gellor, don't be hasty," chimed in Gord. "Why don't we just cut the number of men we pledge in Alpha and stay in? Nobody can bitch about that, right?" Tow, looking pale, hastily added, "Sure, Gellor, don't be in a hurry to lose out on a nice bit of a change, and lots more loot soon. Listen to your pal. Gord and Gellor argued heatedly for a couple of minutes, and to Tow's distress, Gord began to come around to the one-eyed man's way of thinking. Seeing real trouble looming, Tow broke in just before he thought Gord was about to also demand the removal of his own name and pledge of man. "Flatchet say you 2 were going to be captains?" "Lieutenants at first," answered Gord, "but when we offered to bring in 2 companies, he said we would be captains at 5 lucky spare, plus a bounty based on the totals of our pledges, so we could have faith in you guys. Then he kicked in advance to help us recruit. I haven't got that kind of cash now, fellows, honest. Tomorrow? Too late," Gellor broke in. "We are out of this." Gord and Gellor made to leave, but just then the second of Flatchet's lieutenants entered with a couple of recruits. With the arrival of his comrade, Tow saw a way out of this fix, and told them to wait just a second. He pulled the other lieutenant, Switch, into the bedchamber and closed the door. The two new recruits, Tow and Mill-looking, glared at Gord and his one-eyed companion. The looks they got in return caused the pair to gaze elsewhere until Tow and Switch entered the main room a couple of minutes later. Switch quickly signed up the two cutthroats and hustled them out, barring the door on the inside as they left. "You better be right," Swatch said ominously to Tow as the pair moved aside the heavy table, grabbed a plank, and heaved. A trapdoor, cleverly hidden, opened to reveal a cellar below. Tow descended the steep stairway. Switch motioned for Gord and Gallor to follow, and he came last, closing the trapdoor behind him. Tow's candle shed only a faint illumination, but he soon had another pair of thick tallow candles flaming, so that Gord was able to see the place clearly. They were in an earthen cellar, fairly deep, with ledges built along the walls. It was originally a place for storage of roots and the like, now used as a repository for something far more valuable. Somehow Flatchet and his associates had managed to get a great iron trunk into its place. Gord was reminded of Theobald's strongbox, only this chest was at least 10 times that size. Empty. It would weigh several hundred pounds, he guessed. Tow stood in front of the chest, shielding what he was doing, but in a moment he had completed his secret manipulation. There was a grating noise as he turned the key, and then he called Switch to help him with the lid. The pair lifted the slab of metal so that it rested at an angle against the dirt wall behind. Inside were more electrum, silver and copper coins than Gord had seen in his life. "Let's see," murmured Tow. "Each of you gets 5 luckies, and commons totaling 300, plus..." Switch turned back toward the recruits, just in time to get out a warning to his partner. "Look out!" Gord attacked Switch even as he spoke, his dagger glinting darkly in the pale light. Gallor meanwhile sprang forward to engage Tow, who pulled a heavy-bladed knife from his belt the moment his partner shouted the warning. The combat was noisy and protracted, but little if any of the sound would reach any listener above. Gord wounded his opponent several times, taking only a small cut in return. Switch wasn't nearly as skilled at dagger work as the young thief. The lieutenant feinted a move toward the stair, leaped the other way, and struck out the one of the heavy candles which went out. Gord understood his desire. In darkness, Gord's skill and acrobatic movements will be negated. The fight will become blind groping, striking at sounds. Switch made another feint, hoping to drive Gord away so that he could extinguish the other candle. As he reversed himself toward the taper, Gord moved squarely into his path, and Switch fell back, wounded again by the keen point of Gord's long dirk. "Take it all!" Switch cried. "Kill Tow if you have to, but let me go. I'll never be seen again, honest!" But even as the bandit lieutenant begged for his life, he hurled his blade. Gord sidestepped quickly, and the dagger, which had been headed for his throat, caught him in the shoulder instead. With Gord momentarily disabled, Switch lunged for the stairs. He leaped to the fourth step, rushed upward, and strained to heave open the trapdoor. 2 daggers struck him in rapid succession as he did so. The first was Gord's, the second Switch's own, withdrawn from where it had stuck in Gord's left shoulder. That blow finished the would-be escapee, who slumped lifeless at the top of the stairway. As he turned, Gord saw Gallor avoid a knife swipe and then lunge forward to strike Tow a tremendous blow to the temple with the pommel of his dagger. The bandit fell heavily. Gallor added a couple of blows with the blade of his weapon for good measure, then turned to Gord when he was satisfied that Tow was finished. Let me see that wound, Gallor said, moving close enough to examine where Switch's blade had bitten into Gord's shoulder. "You are bleeding heavily, but you'll be all right," he said calmly as he reached into his belt sack for a swatch of cloth. The flow of blood was easily staunched, for the wound was clean and not terribly deep. Gord's padded doublet had taken much of the force away. Gallor bandaged the puncture with the sure-handedness and swiftness of one who had done this sort of thing often before. It will pain you for a few days, and unless you get a cleric to take care of it, you'll have to get someone to sew it shut, but you survive. He was grinning as he said that, and Gord smiled broadly in return. Let's get that coin and get out. Both men began quickly separating the coins. Copper went onto the dirt floor, silver to one side of the chest, electrum to the other. Eventually they had the stuff roughly divided, and then it was time to load it up. Using the shirts of the two lieutenants, they created makeshift sacks for the lackeys, tossing in a few of the silver nobles to complete each load. That was inspired, Gord. Good thing for you I'm fast on the uptake, Gellert said as they bent to the sorting of coins. Then he paused and looked at his companion. What made you think of this? I saw you put the drug in Fletcher's ale, but the rest was one of the best planned deceptions I've seen in a long time. While Gord kept working on the loot, he told Gellert that the powder was something used by the Renee. Then he explained his thinking. I could tell that Fletcher was lying through his teeth. He isn't very clever, and certainly not smart. Whatever he is doing is being set up, I think, and he is in a way above his head. Hey Geller, take a look at this. Geller looked down into the huge iron box. You have hit the bottom, he said. Let's get going. No, take another look at the bottom. It's about half a foot too shallow. Geller reached down, put the fingers of one hand on the floor of the iron container, then extended his outside arm down to the floor. Right you are. Let's find the secret panel. With that, the two thieves began a careful and painstaking scrutiny of the great trunk. Gord spotted where access to the hidden space beneath the false bottom could be gained and called his comrades' attention to it. Both examined the place minutely. Don't screw around with it, Gord. Those tiny scratches are some sort of magical roots, and there's at least one needle trap here, too. See the hole? It's time to take what we got and clear out. I've got another idea to try before we give up, said Gord. Help me tip this thing so it's bottom up, and I'll show you something you are going to like. Geller shook his head in doubt and disagreement, but he took a hold on the chest and assisted Gord in standing it on its side. Coins spilled out and rolled across the hard-pocket hearth. Gord tugged the lid shut, and the pair levered the big box to rest on its top. A rusty slab of iron covering the underside of the trunk presented itself to view. Now what? Geller asked sarcastically as he watched Gord draw his dagger. Then he gaped when he saw Gord's dagger point scribing a shallow gash in the metal bottom. What the hell you got there, Gord? I never seen a blade cut like that before. Gord merely grinned through his clenched teeth as he pressed harder on the weapon. A couple of more strokes and he had made a squarish set of lines about an eighth of an inch deep in the iron. With this to guide his work, the young thief began to make gouging motions with the weapon so that the dagger's blade passed back and forth along the channels, from one to another. It was like a normal knife blade cutting oak. Slow work, but certain to succeed. In minutes, the task was done. The square of metal clattered down into the place between a false bottom and a real one. There was, as predicted, a half-foot space beneath. Geller brought the candle near, and golden light was reflected back on its flickering illumination. Using utmost care, the two proceeded to gather up the stuff hidden in the false bottom of the chest. The orbs there were bright yellow gold all right, but each bore the horned and crowned death's head of the hierarchs on its face, with a coiled serpent on the obverse. With these coins were a soft leather bag and a tube of bone. The two thieves tucked the small bag and the coins in with the rest of their booty, and soon after they had managed to open the tube. Gord, those deviates could have put this here as part of the protections. I have heard of such things, Geller, but curious or not, we must examine it. Anything to do with the Hornet Society is likely to bode ill for us anyway. Without further hesitation, the one-eyed thief unrolled the parchment within the cylinder, while Gord moved beside him so as to be able to read it too. What was there was nothing magical at all, nor was it a map. It was simply a set of instructions, written clearly in common. After scanning it quickly, Gellor replaced it in the tube and tucked that into his belt. The two men exchanged a few quick words about what they would do next, then turned the iron chest back upright. Gord picked up both of the shirt sacks stuffed with coins and went upstairs. Gellor followed him a couple of minutes later, dragging the body of Switch with him. He took it into Fletch's bedroom, dropping it near the still comatose body of the bandit captain. During this time, Gord had been peeling straw from the floor of the bedchamber around the base of the dry wooden walls of the hut. As Gellor returned from the cellar with Toe's body, Gord was applying a candle flame to several spots along the mound of straw. Then Gord and Gellor picked up their loot and let themselves out, closing the door on the flames that were beginning to lick at the walls. They scooped up the registry volume and dusted it outside. A faint whitening of the horizon told them that dawn would come soon. They were entering the tower gate of Stoing when it did. End of chapter 16. And the end of today, because it's very late, 20 past 7. So for today is all. Sorry again for the brief pause in chapter 14, because I have to work. Understand me. And for today is all, only 3 chapters, but next time we do 4, I hope. And next time we will be Wednesday, I think always 5-6 o'clock in the evening. So for today is all. Have a good night, have a good evening, have a good dinner, have a good everything. Till the next time. Bye. No.